Hi. So for my topic, I chose to do autism spectrum disorder. And I'm not going to put the presentation into presentation mode because I tried that and the Zoom wasn't picking up on it for some reason. So I'm just going to leave it like this. So it's just a little table of contents. So these are different faces of well-known people. It's movie director Steven Spielberg, singer Bob Dylan, soccer player Lionel Messi, and author Jane Austen. And one thing that they all have in common is that they have autism spectrum disorder. And obviously, they're all very different people and very well known for very different things. And yeah, so it is something that is around. You probably know a lot of people who have it. So, what is it? Autism spectrum disorder affects different communication and socializing skills and kind of tends to have tends to show restricted behavior patterns, irregular behaviors. It can have a normal to high intelligence level, but not always. And it's a spectrum and a syndrome. So it's a spectrum in that it's different for everyone. Here's a spectrum over here. I know that I used to think of it more in like a linear spectrum. Like you're like on one end down here, you're end over here, but it's actually better to be thought about as a circle because you could like have these or you could like have these. It can go either way. It's not just like you have either one here and one here. It's all mushed together. And it's a syndrome because it's not a disease. It's not something that needs to be cured. It's just kind of something that needs to be adapted to, needs adjustment. And it's complex and behaviorally defined. So it's kind of caught by different behaviors, associated with different behaviors. These can be defined by the behavioral domains. So social interaction, communication, language, and imaginative play, and then range of interests and activities. And this stuff is typically more associated with like kids because it's like what kids do in school and it's what's really important for kids at a young age, but it also can continue into adulthood. So there's subtypes that you kind of break this down into to kind of understand a little bit better. So just autistic disorder, Asperger disorder, which is kind of like high functioning. People with Asperger's have like high intelligence and low social skills. Disintegrative disorder, and then not otherwise specified, and Rett disorder. Not otherwise specified kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that it's a spectrum, and these people don't fall into like the same, like they don't fall into any of these categories, but they still have it because it varies case by case. And then Rett disorder, which I never heard of before doing the research, it's just a brain disorder. So theory of mind and mind blindness is kind of one of the, when I was researching, I found this and like learned what it was, and I think it really helps explain well like the social aspects of ASD. So the theory of mind is the neurotypical neurotypical ability that people have that we pick up on like unsaid rules when socializing. Kind of like empathy because you know, like if you're talking to your friend and your friend's in a bad mood, you don't want to like say something to upset them even more. Stuff like that. It's just kind of like understanding what to say with to people without having them tell you it. And mind blindness is how people with ASD don't pick up on these unsaid rules and interpret the conversations literally. And this leads to a lot of misunderstandings, which then leads to anxious and avoidant behavior, which kind of helps define what ASD is. Um, so there's different genetic causes, and none of these causes are for sure like known to cause it. There's a lot of different things that can cause it. Um, it really just depends, but these are different causes that have been found and have like a good amount of scientific backing to them. So it's been linked to birth difficulties, like defects in birth. There was one study that had elevated levels of peptides and cord blood, and the kids were later diagnosed. And it was like peptides I've never heard of, just like a bunch of different ones of them, which is kind of random, but it's also linked with epilepsy. There's a statistic that a third of people with ASD will eventually develop epilepsy or have epileptic episodes at some point, which is kind of scary. Infantile spasms are especially linked with low functioning autism, and then abnormal cellular metabolisms. But again, these aren't like known causes. Someone could have ASD and have none of these. So it really is just case by case. So daily living skills kind of help define behaviors of someone with ASD, and these are just the day-to-day actions we take, um, and how they might differ for someone with ASD. And it kind of helps explain the discrepancy between high and low functioning. High functioning people have really high daily living skills. Low functioning people have low daily living skills. And daily living skills can be measured by a Weisman daily scale, which has 17 different categories, like a list of 17 different, like, they're just like daily living skills, like things you would do on a day-to-day basis. Like I personally, like when I saw the list, I was like, I never even really thought about these things and like putting them together in a list, but it's like housekeeping, eating, buying yourself the proper resources to like maintain yourself and self-care and hygiene and stuff like that. So that's kind of what these pictures are, to kind of just help explain like what it is. And studies have found that daily living skills rise during adolescence because they kind of come out in childhood. A child with ASD falls behind peers in daily living skills, isn't picking up on them as fast as a neurotypical person would. And that's kind of when ASD can tend to be discovered. And then housekeeping skills improve with age, while personal care and mobility skills will actually decline over time. So those. So ASD in the brain, so again, it's a spectrum. There's no like one thing that causes it, but these are different causes that have been found to be really highly linked to ASD. So research has kind of found that the orbital frontal cortex right here is linked with social understanding, and this may be why there is mind blindness. If there's like damage in this area, why someone's not picking up on their social cues or not having the social understanding, just because that part of their brain isn't working correctly. And then disconnects in the frontal and limbic brain regions, again, also kind of leads to mind blindness. Temporal lobe dysfunction has been really, really highly linked here to school age children having low functioning autism. And then damage in microglia and the signaling cells of neurons has also been found linked to ASD. So therapies and services helping children, not just children, but especially these ones that I'm going to talk about are more children focused, adapt and adjust. So cognitive behavioral therapy it's not that different from like typical like normal therapy, which is sitting down talking with the therapist, but it's kind of using like different things to help impact different behaviors. So it was found that for cognitive behavioral therapy to work best, the therapist can actually help visualize conversations with someone with ASD because of the mind blindness they have. And they're not necessarily picking up on like all the unsaid things in a conversation, things that kind of should go without saying. And so the way they could do this is like having conversations with like drawing what they're thinking on a whiteboard, kind of like a cognitive map, kind of physically visualizing it to help them kind of start to think in that way. And it works best modified for a specific person. Because again, spectrum, everyone's different, everyone has a different kind of like issue. So that is that. But obviously it's therapy, it's expensive. Everyone has the money for that. Everyone has access to that. So that's where school services kind of come hand in hand. Specifically like public school services, because, you know, something that everyone has access to. But obviously there's the issue with funding and money and schools being able to even afford getting special treatment for kids with ASD and stuff like that. These are different strategies that public schools should be using, with kids who have ASD, But one of the studies I read kind of did a whole study on this and went to a bunch of different public schools and tried to figure out like how they were offering services, what they were doing in their services. And they really found that the most important thing that the public schools need is strong education and training. Um, I know like a public school near me has like a program or kind of like a pipeline with a bunch of teachers from Columbia um, who like go to Columbia for like a teaching program that specializes in autism and autism spectrum disorder and how to help kids on that. And then a lot of those teachers go and like work at this specific public school, but it's a very well funded town. It's a very wealthy town. So they have like a really strong program and kids come out of district just to go there for that. So it's just like a good example of the specific instructor training that is needed. So, but obviously this isn't 100% practical because there's a lot of low funded public schools in this country. So overall, ASD is a spectrum and it's just different for everyone on it. So yeah, and these are my references. That's it.